So, a bit of a recap of the things that we have covered. We have the cost-benefit principle, which says, do the thing for which the benefits most exceed costs, right? Which is a little tricky, right? Because we have to be careful. Well, what are the benefits actually? What are the costs actually? We need to incorporate both the direct and indirect, and the direct and indirect. Okay. Figuring all this out is going to entail that we know what our alternatives are in order to calculate all this out. The incentive principle says people will follow incentives, right? If something gets more attractive, which could mean the benefits go up or the costs go down, people do it more. Now, this is a very economics-y kind of assumption, and we will be making this assumption basically all throughout this course, that people are going to follow incentives. And now I'm sure that you can probably think of some examples, perhaps as you have taken a psychology class, where people do not follow incentives in a very clean way, right? There are certainly things you can think of where people seem to be acting against their own self-interest. Two things about that. One, are you sure that's what they're doing? Because sometimes things that maybe seem like it's not in their self-interest actually are. You might just not be thinking about all of their incentives at once. To take one example, if you've ever seen somebody on TV say something that was blatantly false, well, are you sure that it was in their incentive to say something that was true? Right? Might not be. They could very well be following their incentives even by doing something that seems wrong. Right? You just got to think about what their incentives actually are. Or if you've ever seen somebody do something that you thought was completely ridiculous and made no sense at all, again, they might just have different incentives than you are seeing or different preferences than you. They might be the person who doesn't value the jalapeno at all, and you're like, hey, jalapenos are only a penny. That's a great deal. Why aren't you buying one? Like, I don't like jalapenos, right? Lots of different things that could be going on. That was the question was, what happens when people don't follow their incentives? One, are you sure they're not following their incentives? Two, yeah, sometimes people don't follow their incentives. You can find examples where you can pretty cleanly prove that people are not following incentives in a particular situation, which is accurate. It doesn't always apply 100% of the time, but I will say for social science and a prediction that comes in social science, that's pretty good. It has a pretty good rate of success. And you can find some cracks in it, and if you go take like a behavioral economics class or like a psychology class, you will find those cracks. But it's a pretty good starting place for a principles course that covers a lot of behavior, and it really, I think, helps think about why things are the way that they are. So the cracks are there, but still, it's a pretty good place to start. Surplus. Now this, I will warn you, it's going to be a tricky word because it means two different things in this course, and we haven't gotten to the second one yet. But I didn't come up with the words. Somebody else did. But here on day one or week one, surplus means the benefits minus the costs. Right? Surplus they're referring to sort of how much you have extra. Right? If the surplus is really big, you're getting a good deal. Right? You are getting so much more than you would have needed to convince you to do the thing. You can imagine somebody who runs the grocery store looking at this board and saying, you know what? We could increase this to $3.10, increase the price by 60 cents, and you'd still buy the milk, right? If I want you to buy the milk, I could still do that, right? The surplus would have gone down. You wouldn't change your behavior, but there's less left over. It's less of a good deal for you. And so it's benefits minus costs, and this is going to tell us how to follow the cost-benefit principle. Right? We're trying to get that surplus. We want the good deal, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to be just in monetary terms. Remember, this is all subjective. The benefits are subjective. How much do you value a gallon of milk? If you're lactose intolerant, probably not very much, right? And so this is just an abstract representation of how much we get from stuff, right? Or things or experiences, right? A very economics-y thing to do would be to put a monetary value on a hug, which sounds very cold, but really just means that you like it. To an economist, right? Anything you like is going to have some sort of value. It's a bit of a simplification to call that a dollar value, but it works out. Lastly, this idea of opportunity cost. This says that the cost of what you give up, the cost of something is what you give up to get it. Seems pretty straightforward, but it's something that's very easy to forget, right? The cost of something is not necessarily just the dollar value that it costs in the store. It is what you are giving up in order to get it, which could be a lot of things, right? Did I already say this? That's why if you ever heard the term "there's no free lunch," what economists mean by that is not that there's literally no such thing as a free lunch. You can find a lunch that costs you no dollars, but you are eating that lunch instead of some other lunch, right? That is the opportunity cost. You could have done something else. Maybe it's still a good idea to do the thing that you did, but there's always some sort of trade-off. Right? You're always getting something instead of some other thing. There's always some binding constraint, whether it is your money or your time or whatever else, in order to get what you need. So we can ask ourselves, how to apply this stuff in any sort of situation? Are we still writing this stuff? So I mentioned the homework. It's called the choice of whether you're going to do the homework or not. Let's try to write it out. So here, let's think, what's the economic surplus of doing your homework? So the first thing we got to figure out is what's the alternative. We need to know what our alternative is in order to figure out what those indirect costs and benefits are. So this could be different for different people, but if you decide not to do your homework, what's your best alternative use of your time?
Sleep.
Sleep. Great. Good answer. Sleep. Okay. So what are the direct benefits of doing your homework? You get a grade, yeah. You get a grade. Woo. It's going to make it easier to pass, which has all sorts of benefits later down on the line. Okay, great. Do our homework. You get a grade. Easier to pass. Ideally, maybe you get smarter. I'll just put that in there. Question mark. What are the costs? So now we're looking for direct costs, right? So this is not like we're doing homework instead of sleeping. Right? What are the direct costs? Oh, I see a bunch of hands going up. Let's hear from all of you. What do you got?
Time.
Time. Also time. Okay, great. So we got some time costs. Okay, so we got time. All right, yeah, we got to give up our time. Okay. How about sleep? What are the direct benefits of sleep? A lot of hands again.
Better health.
Better health.
Well rested.
Well rested. All right. What are the direct costs of time or of sleep? We also have time, right? That's also going to be, which it's fine to have both the same thing here, right? It just means that when we do our economic surplus, these things are going to cancel out, right? Because we're going to have this as a direct cost and this as an indirect benefit. So they're just going to one's subtract from the other. They'll both go away. Anything else? Any other direct costs of sleep? All right, no, that's fine. Okay, so economic surplus. So we want to calculate out and see which one's positive. So we can ask the economic surplus of homework. It doesn't matter which one we do, just one will be positive number and the other one will be the same number but negative. Okay. So let's see the economic surplus of homework. So we got our direct benefits plus our indirect benefits minus our direct costs minus our indirect costs. Remember to subtract both of these. If algebra is a bit shaky for you, remember that we got to distribute the negative across the two different kinds of costs. All right, so direct benefits, we got all this stuff. So I'll just simplify that down and say grade. How about our indirect benefits? What's our indirect benefit of doing the homework? Time, yeah, we don't have to spend that time sleeping. So time, sleeping. How about the direct cost? Also time. Yeah, that's going to cancel out. Boop. And then finally, our indirect cost. What's the indirect cost? Health, yeah. All right, so what we have is that our economic surplus is whatever we value the grade at, which we can try to imagine, okay, if you were offered a certain amount of money or you were offered the points on the homework, what's the amount of money that you need to be offered to consider that an equal trade, minus the benefits of the health. So again, if you were offered some amount of money or the health benefits that you get from X amount of sleep, however long it would take you to do the homework, then at what point would you consider those to be equal? And we end up with the disturbing conclusion that doing your homework is a trade-off between your grade and your health. Hopefully this is small. Hopefully that's a small health benefit of that extra little bit of sleep. And hopefully this is massive, just so big. So yeah, but that's the sort of process, right? If you've ever done like a pro and con list, this is not that far removed, right? It's a very similar idea. It's just sort of a little bit more structured, makes you think a little bit more cleanly about what are your alternatives really, and how much do you value these things, right? It's not just you're counting out how many things we've listed here. We also have to ask ourselves, how valuable are these individual things in this individual? I mean, you wouldn't give up all your sleep to do homework, but would you give up, 20 minutes of sleep? I don't know, right? You have to figure out where that balance actually is. So, of course, how can I get you to do the homework? Imagine that you're a professor and you want your students to do the homework. Based on this trade-off, how could I do that? I have two levers. Yeah.
You could grade the homework.
I could grade the homework more. Yeah, I could make this homework worth your entire grade, right? And then you consider it probably worth taking a couple minutes off sleep, right? What else could I do? Make it less time consuming, right? If I want you to do it, I need to either increase the benefits, make it a higher grade, or reduce the costs, make it so you're giving up less sleep or whatever else you're doing in order to do it. So you can see how this all works out, both from the side of the person who's actually making the choice, which is you, and you are often making a choice even if someone tells you you've got to do something, or the person who's designing the choice to be made, which is me, right? We both have to think about that.